Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good evening. Thank you, Mas. I think I'll comment on the bipartisanship and institutions slightly later, because there's a few conclusions and lessons that we have to admit what the last general election has given us. Perhaps what was most significant about the last general election was whether or not Pakatan will survive. I know that a lot of hope was put that we will take over Putrajaya, but as one of the planners behind the scene, from the very beginning, my concern was whether or not we would survive the onslaught. Because 2013 was a completely different ball game, not 2008. 2008 was a silent protest at the time when BN was sleeping. 2013 was a climax of 5 years worth of onslaught, and the onslaught came from various ways. People being bought over, threats, and in the last 1 year of the campaign, billions of money were thrown to the electorates. In normal circumstances, I don't think any political coalition in our position could have survived in defending our territory, and therefore the first sigh of relief of the last general election, in spite of despite of the frustration of not going to Putrajaya, was the fact that Pakatan and the ideals of an alternative coalition waiting to take power was intact after the general election. That means that Pakatan is here to stay. No matter how BN tries after this, I think BN has to concede that Pakatan is here to stay. No matter what they do to the first generation or the first tier of the leadership, the second tier is there to stay. The third tier is coming. This is the phase of Malaysian politics, at least for the next 2 or 3 decades to come. And that can only mean well for our democracy. But what worries me is that the intense competition as a result of the existence of a two realistic and possible governing coalition, the way that BN has reacted to this intense competition has been extremely worrying. Because I think anyone who does numbers and anyone who reads, and I'm sure Meredith might figure this out in her next book, is that at the rate of the intense competition, and given the results of the last 2 or 3 general elections, the trajectory of BN's political survival, BN's numbers, days are numbered, basically. It's only a matter of time that BN is going to lose. The question is it going to happen in the next general election or the general election after that? And therefore, it's only understandable with the kind of reaction that BN leadership especially has displayed from the very first night of the result of the last general election. What we saw over the last 8 months was nowhere, I think, in my living memory at least, over the last 36 years, that the race religion cuts was so dominant in our livelihood. And I travel excessively to all corners of the country. I just came back from Sarawak. And what is so worrying is that while we have this very civil discussion and exchanges in this room, things are not like that on the ground. On the ground, in corners all over the country, elements that are meant to pit one against another is at work. On the ground, I think our people, especially the young ones, is more polarized than ever. The Chinese will look at things almost exclusively from the Chinese and non-Malays perspective, as a general reaction to the way Barisan Nasional has put all the blame on the Chinese. The Malays with the insecurity and under siege mentality will retreat and will see everything as threats. And it's being manufactured. These are being emphasized and reiterated day after day on the ground. And that's why I think it is, if anything, it is as if the last resort that Barisan Nasional will rely to in order to cling on to power, given the trajectory of its political survival, is to make sure that race and religion and everything and anything that can divide the public will become dominant in our society. That's why, as much as the last general election was good news somewhat, because the two coalitions will stay, we were expecting more intense policy-based politics. I don't think that same optimism expounded by Datuk Saifuddin is shared by the leadership of his party and his coalition in Putrajaya. What we will witness in the next 6-7 months, 1 year to go, is the intense politicking based on race politics, the intense politicking of politics of punishment. Even I went to the interior of Sarawak over the weekend. The issue is how one kampung has been denied the most simplest things like water supply because that longhouse voted for PKR in the last general election. The politics of punishment is going to be very dominant, and perhaps I think what is most dangerous is the psyche of those in power in Putrajaya, that in order to retaliate, there will be more policy where everything is lopsided, and there will be overcompensation for a certain group or certain community, and over punishment of a certain group of a certain community. At the time when the country is at a junction, when we need to develop and when we need to be more mature, there will be a retreat from that, which if we do not manage properly, it is an entirely new political landscape, very much different from the time in between the 2008 general election and the 13 general election, and therefore that worries me. That's why if Mas asks, how is it, are we going to go forward, because Dato preaches about the need for bipartisanship, for strengthening of our democratic institutions. If anything, for the last 8 months, Barisan Nasional has done exactly to demolish that idea. My first session in Parliament, after 2 weeks, there was a motion moved by Barisan Nasional to suspend me for 6 months. The first person to be referred in Parliament to be suspended was Dr. Surendran. And that because I took the risk to expose the person who was given the contract to supply the indelible ink. And everyone wanted to know that. Even BN politicians wanted to know that. Everyone in the country wanted to know that. But the reaction of the people in power from Barisan Nasional, instead of coming to terms of the anger of the country for the total messed up of the indelible ink, the next morning there was a motion, emergency motion, to refer me and to suspend me for 6 months. That is not bipartisanship. That's certainly not the act of a political party that understood the messages of the electorates. We've been talking about reforming the election commission for years and years. The aftermath of the last general election saw millions of people came to the streets of Malaysia to demand just one very simple thing: the reform of SPR and the removal of the top two. In Thailand, the number of people who came out on the streets, I think, was a fraction of the total number of Malaysians who came out to support the cause of Bersih, and subsequently after that the Black 505 rallies. At the most conservative estimation, I would say at least 1.5 million participated over a period of 1 or 2 years. And the most conservative. 1.5 million people coming onto the streets asking for, I think what is very logical, so that the two topmost officers of the SPR, who have been proven to be quite incompetent, and the reaction is the total mobilization of everything that the government has and do not have in order to defend these two discredited. And in the last few months, we were shocked by another former SPR chairman who came forward and admitted that the whole process of redenomination and the whole operation of SPR was geared in order to protect the interests of SPR. That is not the response, or the lack of response from the Prime Minister was, to me, a manifestation of how BN retreats instead of going forward for bipartisanship, for strengthening democratic institution. What we had is a government who is desperate to cling on to the last breath, and for that I think I'm very concerned. And to cap it off, all this could only happen because of the lack of totally free and independent media in the country. And at the rate that Utusan is going and all the media under Media Prima or RTM are going, I do not see an improvement. I do not see that our public institutions will be strengthened. I do not see bipartisanship to take place. And after almost 8 months in Parliament, I do not see our Parliament can make a difference at all to advance. Oh yeah, Hisham is already excited. Okay. Yeah, we had long debates about whether or not we need to go to Parliament. So, but after 8 months, I don't think the Parliament nor Barisan Nasional has the willpower to make a difference. And therefore, I think, I wouldn't say that we're back to square one, but I don't think that the next 4 or 5 years is the same political terrain that Barisan Nasional or Pakatan Rakyat are used to. For Barisan Nasional, they are up against, I think, a much more well-coordinated opponent, either in the form of Pakatan Rakyat or in the form of public movement which are independent, totally independent of Pakatan Rakyat or Barisan Nasional. We have a vibrant, less partisan public movement which will not hesitate to come and stand up to be counted. That is what Barisan Nasional has to contend with in the next 5 years. For Pakatan Rakyat, that means that we are facing a Barisan Nasional that is more mean, more harsh, and more willing to ignore everything in order to stay in power. The call for reinstatement of ISA, for example, the enactment of more stricter for the lack of better word, stricter laws, is a sign that BN is going to go back to the oldies, and therefore people like Isham, people like myself must be prepared to spend more time behind bars. I don't rule it out. I don't think anyone rules it out, because that is the message that we've been getting from Barisan Nasional. In spite of all, and I think Datuk Seri Najib has been proven internally in his party that a message of reconciliation and moderation will only doom Barisan Nasional in electoral history. And therefore, I think to conclude it, I think while the last general election was generally a good result for the country and for our people, it has unleashed a different kind of political terrain and political monster that we have to go back to the drawing board to see, given all these challenges, how the moderate voices, as put forward by Datuk Saifuddin, can survive in an environment where it's a do or die, and that's the psyche of Barisan Nasional in Putrajaya. And for that, I think things can only get worse, economically, politically, and socially, and we are going for a long, difficult 4 years. Thank you very much.